My wife used to say I was boring because I preferred staying home to take care of our kids instead of going out partying. She left me for a fun guy, and now she's begging to come back, because her new love doesn't know how to be an adult, much less a father. I'm 35 years old and I've been working in cybersecurity for over a decade. It's not the most exciting job in the world, I admit that. I spend my days in front of a computer making sure other people's systems don't get breached. There's no glamour to it, but it pays extremely well. I make 6 figures a year, and with 2 kids, that matters more than any flashy job title. My ex-wife, Caroline, is also 35. We met in college. Back then, she was the classic party girl. There wasn't a single weekend without gatherings, new bars, or spontaneous nights out. And to be honest, I enjoyed going with her. We were 21, had no responsibilities, lived on instant noodles and part-time jobs. Life was simple. We went out on Fridays and Saturdays, rested on Sundays, and went back to classes on Mondays. Good times. We got married at 25, and at 27 our first daughter, ABA, was born. 2 years later, Mason arrived, and that's when everything started to change. Not in a bad way at first, just differently. I stopped wanting to go out every weekend and started worrying more about bills, diapers, and the future. At first, Caroline seemed to understand. Sometimes she complained that we didn't do fun things anymore, but she'd calm down when I reminded her about the mortgage or ABA's daycare fees. Then, 2 years ago, everything went off the rails. Caroline started hanging out with a group of women from her yoga class, all around their 30s, mostly single or divorced, living like they were still 20. They started going out on Thursday nights, then Fridays too, and eventually Saturdays for brunches that stretched into dinner. At first, I didn't mind. I thought socializing would be good for her. Being a mom can be exhausting. The problem started when she insisted that I go out with them, not for family time, but to nightclubs during the week. She wanted us to hire a babysitter on a Tuesday night, when I had to wake up at 6 in the morning for work. The first time, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She got angry and called me boring, a premature old man who had lost his spark. I tried to explain that my priorities had changed. Watching ABA at her soccer practice or building Legos with Mason made me happy, and that a quiet dinner at home was, to me, great fun. She said I was using the kids as an excuse to be lazy. That hurt. From then on, the arguments became constant. Every weekend there was a new reason, a new bar downtown, a DJ friend, a festival, a can't-miss outing. Always the same question, why can't you be more fun? And then Hunter showed up. A 28-year-old bartender at a trendy place, with a leased BMW and 3 roommates. He lived in chaos, but according to Lauren, one of Caroline's friends, he was exciting and knew how to enjoy life. Hunter had been hanging around her group for months before the disaster. He always had stories about wild parties or spontaneous trips. It was all a facade, a social media character, pure posturing, no depth. Caroline fell hard. She started mentioning him daily. That Hunter said you had to live in the moment, that Hunter taught them not to be afraid of being young. Young. We were 35, with 2 kids and a mortgage. That phase had already served its purpose. The final breaking point came last Thanksgiving. Caroline had been irritable for weeks, making snide comments about our boring life and lack of spontaneity. Meanwhile, I had just received a promotion to senior security architect, with a significant raise. While I was thinking about opening a college fund for ABA and fixing the patio, she was dreaming about Vegas getaways like the ones Hunter posted on Instagram. The night before Thanksgiving, I was in the kitchen preparing food for the next day. My parents, her sister, her brother-in-law, and the kids were coming. I was focused on the turkey when Caroline walked in dressed for a nightclub. Tight dress, heels, flawless makeup. "Where are you going dressed like that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm going out with the girls. Hunter knows the owner of a new place and we're on the list," she replied without looking at me. "Family's coming tomorrow, but don't worry, I'll be back late. You can handle the morning." I tried to stay calm, but I knew something had broken. It wasn't just another night out, It was confirmation that she was already living in a world where there was no space for me, or our children. I asked her to think about the kids, who would be sad if she was too tired to spend the day with them. I reminded her that my mother was counting on her help, like every year, and that it was a family holiday. That's when she said the sentence that, without realizing it, ended our marriage right there in the kitchen, next to a bowl of cranberry sauce. God, you're so boring now. When did you become this person? You used to be fun. Now you're just this middle-aged suburban dad who thinks watching Netflix is an adventure. I'm 35, not 65. I'm not ready to feel dead. I stayed silent, processing her words. Suburban dad was said like an insult, as if working hard to provide for your family and being present for your kids was something shameful. You're right, I replied calmly. I am a suburban dad. I'm 35 and I have 2 kids. That's who I am. If you wanted something different, maybe you should have thought about that before having kids with someone who works in tech. She rolled her eyes and left. She came back at 4 in the morning, slept through most of the next day, and showed up to dinner looking wrecked. My mother, of course, didn't miss the chance to make passive-aggressive comments about the store-bought pie Caroline was supposed to make from scratch. 2 weeks later, she told me she wanted a divorce. She said she'd been thinking about it for months, that she still loved me but wasn't in love anymore. That she needed to rediscover herself, live experiences, and figure out who she was while she was still young. She used the word journey at least 15 times. I swear she got it from some self-help blog. The most shocking part was that she had already talked to a lawyer. Everything was ready: joint custody, child support, alimony, the full package. And the worst part of all, everyone knew except me. Her yoga friends, her inner circle. They all knew about her new beginning, while I still believed we were just going through a rough patch. In reality, Caroline had been planning her exit for months with a group of divorced women who, without a doubt, congratulated her for choosing herself. I didn't argue. What was the point? You can't force someone to want to stay with you. I chose mediation instead of a court battle. We agreed on a custody arrangement. The kids would stay with me during the week and with her on weekends. I let her keep the house, even though I continued paying half the mortgage so our children's standard of living wouldn't be disrupted. Following my lawyer's advice, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near work. And honestly, it wasn't bad at all. It was quiet, organized, and for the first time in years, there were no yoga mats scattered everywhere. 2 weeks after I moved out, Caroline moved Hunter into the house. 2 weeks. Our children were still asking when Dad was coming back, while she was already living with a man so young he could have passed for her older brother. But sure, I was the boring one. The kids hated him from day one. ABA, 8 years old and sharper than many adults, asked me directly why Mom's friend was always at the house. Mason, 6, just said Hunter smelled weird and refused to eat anything he cooked. Kids pick up on everything. They always do. The first month was almost tragicomic. Caroline constantly posted on social media about her new phase and her best life. Photos at clubs, restaurants, concerts, and festivals. Hunter appeared in almost all of them, wearing his cap backward and that eternal teenager smile. My favorite post was one where she wrote something about surrounding yourself with people who reflect your energy, while he was asleep on a beach chair at 2 in the afternoon. Curiously, the kids never appeared in any of those photos. Strange, right? As if her best life didn't include them. When I picked the kids up on Sunday nights, they were exhausted. ABA told me that many weekends they were left with their maternal grandmother because Mom and Hunter were too tired from going out. Mason said Hunter spent all day playing video games and told him not to make noise because he had a headache. A clear Father of the Year candidate. By the 3rd month, everything started to fall apart. Caroline called me one Friday night, crying. Hunter had used her credit card for an emergency and maxed it out buying DJ equipment to launch his music career. Not long after, one afternoon she called again, her voice nervous and embarrassed, asking if I could cover her part of the mortgage just for that month. I stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to process what I'd just heard. It was surreal that she was asking me for financial help when just months earlier she'd chosen to walk away for a more exciting life. I replied calmly, without sarcasm, even though every word felt heavy. That sounds more like a Hunter problem than a me problem. She didn't say anything. I only heard her shaky breathing before she hung up. I don't know how she handled that payment. Maybe, like so many times before, she turned to her parents. But it was only the beginning of a chain of mistakes that would drag her somewhere she wouldn't know how to escape. The 4th month marked a turning point. Hunter crashed Caroline's car. There was no alcohol or drugs involved, he was just texting while driving. Insurance didn't cover the damage because he wasn't listed on the policy. That same night, she called me again. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "I need money to cover the deductible or I won't be able to get to work." I sighed. It wasn't cruelty, it was exhaustion. "Ask Hunter," I said. "He's so free and spontaneous. I'm sure he'll figure something out." She hung up without answering. Even so, I knew Caroline always managed to find someone to rescue her. But what came next was worse. By the 5th month, the story turned into a mix of tragedy and comedy. One afternoon, a girl around 23 showed up at the house screaming that Hunter owed her 3 months of rent and had also stolen her PlayStation. Caroline had to call the police. That night, ABA called me crying, saying there were bad people outside yelling. No parent should ever hear that. My voice shook as I tried to calm her, and the next morning I filed for emergency custody. I couldn't allow my children to live in the middle of that chaos. The 6th month was the breaking point. Caroline, who worked in marketing and had landed a decent position, started showing up late or hungover to meetings. Her performance collapsed, and the company put her on a performance improvement plan. She called me in a panic, saying she couldn't lose her job and needed me to take care of the kids while she tried to focus. "I thought I was too boring to understand your new lifestyle," I replied, with a calm I had to force. "I guess now you'll have to handle it on your own." Even so, I agreed to keep the kids. Not for her. For them. They needed stability, routine, and someone who didn't disappear after a night out. Meanwhile, Hunter continued his own spiritual journey. He had quit his bartender job because, according to him, it didn't fulfill him. He decided to start a podcast about living in the present and connecting with your inner universe. He had 12 subscribers, one of them was his mother. He spent Caroline's money on microphones, courses, and supposed mentors who promised to turn him into an enlightened consciousness creator. In practice, he was a parasite with a Zen script. By the 7th month, my kids started asking to stay with me permanently. ABA, only 8, told me she didn't want to go to her mom's house anymore because Hunter was weird and lazy. Mason confessed that Hunter ate all the good snacks and often made his mom cry. That broke me inside. As much as Caroline had hurt me, she was still my children's mother, and it hurt to see the image they were forming of her. The 8th month was total collapse. It was an ordinary Tuesday, almost midnight, when my apartment doorbell rang. When I opened it, Caroline was standing there. She had deep dark circles under her eyes, messy hair, and clothes that hung loosely on her. The woman I had been married to for a decade was no longer there. "I made a mistake," she murmured, unable to meet my eyes. I invited her in and made coffee. As the aroma filled the room, she began to speak through tears. She confessed that Hunter had cheated on her with a 22-year-old girl who worked as a waitress at his old bar. He'd been seeing her for months, and Caroline found out because the girl had posted photos on social media taken inside her house, on her bed. The same bed Caroline and I had bought for our 5th wedding anniversary. But that wasn't even the worst part. Hunter didn't just steal money from her purse, he also took jewelry from the bedroom and, to top it all off, opened credit cards in her name. The debts were massive, her credit was ruined, and the house was already heading into foreclosure. The reason? Hunter convinced her to stop paying the mortgage so they could go on vacation to Cabo. A trip where, while she was passed out drunk, he slept with 2 different women. "I don't know what to do," she said, trembling. "I need help, Travis." And yes, a part of me felt sorry for her. No one deserves to be used like that. But I also knew she had chosen that path. She traded stability for excitement, commitment for adventure, and the adventure was devouring her. "Talk to your lawyer," I finally said. "The same one you hired to divorce me might be able to help you." "I can't afford him," she whispered. "I can't afford anything. I'm going to lose the house." "That's unfortunate," I replied. She stared at me, waiting for me to do what I always used to do. Rescue her, fix everything, pay for her mistakes. But that chapter was over. I was no longer her lifeline or her solution. "The kids can stay with me," I added, "until you get back on your feet." She broke down crying again, but she agreed. She had no other choice. Shortly after that, Hunter disappeared. He blocked her everywhere and moved in with the waitress. In his new version of the story, Caroline was the crazy ex who wouldn't leave him alone. Meanwhile, she moved back in with her parents. Her father, who had always thought of me as dull, ended up telling her she'd been a fool to leave me. Her mother just kept repeating that she should have thought about the children. The divorce had been final for a year. In the settlement, Caroline had kept the house, but months later, she lost it. I bought it back from the bank for far less than it was worth. Maybe it was a small gesture, maybe even a bit vindictive, but it was also a smart investment. The kids were happy to return to their old bedrooms, and that was enough for me. Today, Caroline sees the kids every other weekend, when her schedule allows. She works 2 jobs to pay off the debts Hunter left in her name. She lives in a small studio in an area she never would have considered before. No more yoga classes, no girls' nights, no Sunday brunches. Just work, exhaustion, and routine, the simple life she used to despise. Sometimes she texts me late at night, during those hours when silence becomes unbearable. Sometimes I read the messages, I don't always reply. Some wounds never fully close, and others simply stop hurting with time. Caroline usually tells me she misses our family, that she longs for the quiet life we shared and now values the stability she once called boring. She says she ruined everything over something that wasn't even real, that Hunter used her and she didn't see it because she was blinded by feeling young and desired again. I don't respond anymore. There's nothing left to say. The kids are doing better. ABA is still in therapy, learning how to heal the wounds left by abandonment. Mason started playing soccer and turns out he's talented. They barely ask about Hunter anymore. Sometimes they just want to know why their mom always seems sad. I tell them that sometimes adults make decisions that don't work out. It's the kindest explanation I can give them. Caroline's yoga friends vanished like magic. It's funny how that works. When she hosted parties and paid for rounds, they all talked about women supporting women and positive energy. When the money ran out, no one called again. Lauren, the same one who introduced her to Hunter, said Caroline was ruining the vibe with her negativity. The irony hurts. My parents, devastated by the divorce, decided to erase her from their lives. My mother refers to her simply as that woman, and my father just nods with resignation when he hears her name. Meanwhile, Caroline's parents call me more than they call their own daughter. Sometimes they pick the kids up from school, and her mother always hugs me a little too tightly, repeating that I'm a good father. I know it's her way of apologizing for what her daughter did. And the truth is, despite everything, I'm better than ever. The promotion I got before Caroline left opened new doors months later. Today I earn almost twice what I did when we were married. I still live in our old house, big, for bedrooms, but now everything feels different. There's peace. Real peace. No one calls me boring for staying home on a Friday night. No one criticizes me for being responsible. No one spends money we don't have trying to impress strangers. A few months ago, I started seeing someone. Her name is Daniele. I met her at a work conference. She's 37, has a son, and has been divorced for 3 years. Her ex left her for his secretary, so she understands my story perfectly. We're taking things slowly. We make family plans and talk about what actually matters. To her, spending a Saturday at a hardware store is a valid plan. She gets excited about grocery store discounts. She falls asleep at 9:30 watching Netflix and doesn't feel guilty about it. It sounds simple, but to me, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Caroline found out about Daniele when she came to pick up the kids one weekend, and ABA mentioned her. I remember her expression: surprise, jealousy, and a contained sadness, like someone had just slapped her. She tried to hide it, casually asking who Daniele was, how long we'd been seeing each other, and whether it was serious. ABA, with the brutal honesty only children have, replied, "She's really nice, and she doesn't yell at Dad when he's tired." That same night, Caroline called me. It was the first time she had done so in months. Until then, she'd only texted. She wanted to know everything. And then she said the unexpected. "I've been thinking, maybe we could try again, for the kids. They need their parents together." I laughed. Not out of cruelty, out of disbelief. "Caroline," I said, "you left me because you were bored. Because I wasn't fun enough. Because I chose to be a present father instead of a party guy. Nothing has changed. I'm still the same quiet man who goes to bed at 10, who enjoys keeping the yard tidy, and who considers it an adventure to try a new dinner recipe." She was silent for a few seconds, then replied softly, "That doesn't sound so bad anymore." Of course, I didn't say it out loud. Because you learned the hard way that stability isn't boring, it's valuable. That being reliable isn't unattractive, it's a virtue. That choosing your family over fleeting fun isn't settling, it's growing up. But you had to lose everything to understand it. At that moment, she started crying. She said she knew she had made a mistake, that she would do whatever it took to fix it, that this time it would be different. And maybe she meant it. Maybe she truly had learned. But it was no longer my problem. She chose excitement, adventure, and chaos, and that was exactly what she got. She chose Hunter with all his drama, his debts, and his betrayals. She got the social media life she had wanted so badly. I, on the other hand, kept my children, my peace, and a woman who valued all of that from day one. The last time I saw Caroline was a couple of weeks ago, during ABA's school play. She looked tired, aged, worn down by the life she chose. Hunter, unsurprisingly, was nowhere to be seen. I hadn't seen him in over a year. Caroline sat alone at the back of the auditorium, her back straight but her gaze empty. Meanwhile, Daniele and I sat in the front rows with my parents and Mason, waiting for the curtain to rise. The room buzzed with murmurs, cameras ready, and excited parents. From the stage, among crayon-painted sets, ABA scanned the audience. When she finally found us, her face lit up. She smiled and waved with that mix of pride and joy only a child can show. When the play ended, she ran straight toward us without hesitation. She hugged Daniele tightly, high-fived her brother, and only then remembered that her mother was there too. Caroline stood up slowly, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. I noticed it immediately, that look of delayed understanding, the look of someone realizing they broke something that can no longer be repaired. She watched us in silence, uncomfortable, as if a truth had finally ignited inside her, one she didn't want to accept, that the boring life she had despised was, in reality, her only refuge. That the stability she once saw as a prison was what gave meaning to everything. But it was too late. Far too late. After the event, while Daniele took the kids out for ice cream, Caroline approached me with hesitant steps. "I really did love our life," she whispered, her eyes shining. "I just didn't understand it until I lost it." "Yes," I replied, cutting her off gently. "That's usually how it happens." I could see on her face that she wanted to continue, that she had a speech ready about second chances, about the children's well-being, about forgiveness. But I was no longer the man willing to listen to empty promises. I said goodbye calmly and walked back to my family. My real family, the one that didn't leave when life became monotonous. Over time, I realized the signs had always been there. Dissatisfaction disguised as independence, increasingly frequent nights out, comparisons to more exciting couples. It was all part of the same pattern, A crisis dressed up as self-discovery that was really just fear of stillness. People think they can run away from themselves by changing scenery, not realizing that dissatisfaction follows them wherever they go. When it happens to you, you don't see it. You just feel something dimming, the person you love slowly drifting away without explanation. You try to compensate, be better, more fun, more understanding. But you can't compete with a fantasy. You can't defeat something that exists only in someone else's mind. I wasn't enough for Caroline. But I was, and still am, enough for ABA, for Mason, and for Daniele. They understand that stability isn't boredom, it's peace. That's my story. My wife left me because she said I was too boring. She chose a party-filled lifestyle with a man 7 years younger and ended up with empty hands. I moved on, raising my children, sharing my life with a woman who values calm, and finding fulfillment in simplicity. I go to sleep every night at 9:30, without guilt or resentment. The irony is brutal. What Caroline thought was holding her back was actually what was holding her together. She had to lose everything to understand it. But by the time she did, there was no space left for her. I was already with someone who valued who I had always been, without asking me to change. The lesson is simple. If someone calls you boring, let them go. Their idea of excitement may just be chaos disguised as adventure. But the story didn't end there. The worst came later, when Caroline tried to come back wrapped in desperate gestures. 3 months after the school play, she began a quiet campaign to regain ground. She didn't approach me directly, her pride still weighed more than her regret. So she used the children as intermediaries. She started buying them expensive gifts, things she clearly couldn't afford, tablets, consoles, designer clothes. ABA came back one weekend with a brand new iPhone. 8 years old. 8. When I asked Caroline what sense it made to give a child a phone like that, she said ABA deserved nice things and that I was controlling for questioning it. Right, because protecting your daughter and limiting unrestricted internet access is a crime. I had to become the villain. I returned most of the gifts and explained to the kids that their mother loved them, but that sometimes adults make impulsive decisions. ABA understood. Mason just asked if he could keep the PlayStation, and I let him. After everything he'd been through, he deserved something that made him smile. Over time, Caroline began showing up everywhere she knew we'd be. Games, school meetings, even doctor's appointments. Suddenly, she transformed into a model mother, at least on the surface. She posted photos with captions like, "Nothing matters more than my little ones," while spending the games staring at her phone and only looking up to pose. Other parents noticed. The looks of pity were unavoidable. In a small town, stories spread fast. She was the mother who left her family for a younger man and ended up alone. I was the father weathering the storm with a tired smile. Daniele handled everything with her usual grace. Not a single unnecessary word, never a comparison or a criticism. She was simply present. When Caroline made passive-aggressive comments, Daniele smiled and changed the subject. Her calm was my anchor. The real breaking point came 4 months ago. Caroline had been hinting for weeks that she wanted another chance, using the kids to drop lines like, "Wouldn't it be nice if we all lived together again?" ABA started asking questions. Mason grew confused. I had to set boundaries again. What I didn't expect was for her to show up at my office. Yes, at my workplace, in front of all my co-workers. She walked in dressed like she was going to a club, wearing the makeup she used in our early years, carrying a lunchbox I recognized instantly. "I thought maybe you hadn't eaten lunch," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer about love, or regret, or even the children. It was about refusing to accept that the door had closed forever. "Do you remember how much you used to love my chicken parmesan?" she said. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Everyone pretended to keep doing their own thing, but their looks said it all. Amber from accounting was practically leaning forward so she wouldn't miss a single word. Travis from IT was watching me with a mix of surprise and pity that needed no explanation. "What the hell is going on, man?" I calmly took her by the arm, and led her out of the building before she caused a bigger scene. As we crossed the parking lot, with the sun reflecting off her car's windshield, I understood it with absolute clarity. That woman was no longer part of my life. I told her her behavior was completely inappropriate, that she couldn't show up at my workplace unannounced, and that boundaries exist for a reason. Caroline broke down in tears right there in the middle of the parking lot, saying she just wanted to prove she could be the wife I needed. Caroline, I replied calmly, I don't need a wife. I already have a girlfriend, and you stopped being one. That was your choice. She insisted she had made a mistake, but that wasn't true. It wasn't a slip-up, it was a conscious decision. You hired a lawyer, signed the papers, divided our assets, and brought another man into our home. That wasn't a mistake, that was a choice. And choices have consequences. She tried to kiss me right there in full view of everyone, while Travis watched from a third-floor window. I pulled away so fast I almost lost my balance. The look of confusion on her face stayed with me, as if she couldn't understand that I no longer loved her. Is it because of Daniele? She asked, in that jealous, sarcastic tone that always gave her away. She's not even that pretty. There was the real Caroline, the same as always, hiding behind tears and sweet words, shallow, cutting, and convinced that everything revolved around appearances. Daniele is beautiful, I replied, but more importantly, she's stable, kind, and she doesn't abandon her family when she gets bored. So yes, in part it's because of her, but mostly, it's because of you. After that, the office talked about nothing else. The following weeks were filled with concern disguised as gossip and casual lunches whose only purpose was speculation. Amber even asked if Caroline and I were trying to reconcile, and when I told her no, she looked disappointed. Caroline then changed tactics. She started saying I wouldn't let her see the kids, that I was manipulating them into hating her. Some of her former yoga friends, who hadn't spoken to her in over a year, suddenly appeared on my social media accusing me of being a narcissist and practicing parental alienation. I had to contact my lawyer and present the custody agreement, the messages where Caroline asked me to keep the kids for more days, and the emails where she said she had other plans. When they received a warning about a possible defamation lawsuit, they vanished immediately, as if they had never existed. But the damage was already done. At school, people started treating me differently. Several mothers stopped inviting ABA over to play, and one father even asked me if it was true that I wouldn't let Caroline see the kids. I had to show him the custody calendar on my phone to shut him up. Daniele wanted to talk to Caroline, but I asked her not to. I knew Caroline was trapped in a spiral she would only escape once she hit rock bottom, and she didn't take long to get there. 2 months ago, she lost her second job. She worked at a department store and was fired for using her employee discount to benefit the same yoga friends who later abandoned her. She called me crying, saying she didn't know how she would pay rent and asking if I could help her, for the sake of the children. Ask Hunter, I told her, though he's probably busy looking for his next victim. That's cruel, she said between sobs. Cruel was telling your husband he was boring and leaving him for someone you'd known for 6 months, I replied. This is just the consequence. She hung up. An hour later she texted me, asking if she could stay in my garage. Not even in the house, in the garage. I didn't respond. The kids started noticing the change. ABA asked me why her mother's apartment was so small and why there was barely any food. Mason mentioned that their mother cried when she thought they couldn't see her. Hearing that was devastating, but I could no longer rescue her. It wasn't my responsibility. Even so, I increased the weekends with her, thinking it would be best for everyone. It didn't work. Caroline couldn't afford activities or outings, so they spent their days watching movies on her laptop after she sold the TV. Over time, the kids started saying they didn't want to go. It's boring, they said, and the irony was painfully obvious. Last month came the final scene. Caroline's parents were celebrating their anniversary with an elegant dinner at a private club. The invitation listed Daniele and me together. Caroline was listed alone. It was as uncomfortable as I imagined. She sat at the singles table, surrounded by teenage cousins, while we shared a table with her parents and the kids. Her father spoke about the value of commitment and the importance of not running away from problems. Her mother added that she was glad to see the children surrounded by stable figures. Caroline, visibly drunk, began speaking loudly about how outdated marriage was and how some people were too cowardly to live their truth. Her Aunt Patsy asked her to sit down and stop embarrassing herself. Caroline tried to leave dramatically, but her heel broke and she ended up limping out under everyone's silent stares. ABA saw it all and simply sighed, resigned. That day I understood that Caroline wasn't just paying the consequences of her actions, she was trapped in a cycle she didn't want to leave. She kept choosing excitement over peace, chaos over stability. While we all grew up and moved on, she remained stuck trying to reclaim something that no longer exists. Daniele explained it better than anyone. There are people who destroy everything good they have, believing happiness is somewhere else, and when they finally get there, they discover that what they were looking for was left behind. Caroline was once a great mother. Before the chaos, before the yoga and before Hunter. She was devoted, affectionate, and patient. She threw unforgettable birthday parties, knew the names of all the kids' friends, and never missed a single school event. That was the woman I loved, the one who disappeared without warning. The children still remember that version of their mother. ABA talks about mornings when she made animal-shaped pancakes or read stories using different voices. Mason keeps a photo of her pushing him on a swing, both of them laughing. It's a reflection of a mother who once existed, but who is no longer here. Now it's her parents who support her financially, though I doubt it will last much longer. She's 36 years old, has no savings, a poor credit history, a derailed career, and a reputation that's hard to clean up. In this city, everyone knows what she did. Opportunities, both professional and romantic, have been closing one by one. Sometimes she sends me long messages, almost always at night, when she's been drinking. She says she regrets everything, that Hunter meant nothing, that she finally understands what she lost. I no longer reply. Not out of resentment, but because I've finally understood that there are battles you don't win by trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Daniele and I continue building something solid. The kids adore her daughter, Shelby, and the dynamic between all of us flows naturally, as if we had always been a family. It's not perfect, but it's real. And that's enough. A few days ago, Mason told his mother that he wanted to live with me full-time. He said it without any intention of hurting her, just with the honesty of a child. I watched Caroline's face crumble, and for a moment, I felt sorry for her. But there was no turning back. Sometimes I watch her from the window when she comes to pick up the kids. She pauses for a moment in front of the garden. She looks at the bikes leaning against the wall, the flowers we planted together, the children's handprints pressed into the concrete. All of it, the quiet, stable, honest life, was what she chose to leave behind. And as I watch her walk away, I understand something with absolute clarity. I was never boring. Did this story resonate with you? Like it and share it.